Cluster Truck. Now, when I say it's a mess, I am absolutely not saying it's an irredeemable, complete and utter catastrophic failure of a gaming experience. Just one that warrants a proper analysis. I'm not saying that. My heart is saying that, but I'm not. When this game came out in 2016, the marketing space for independent video games was very different. If you had a juicy game on your hands, there were only a select few avenues you could take in order to get your game noticed by the masses. For most developers, those options basically boiled down to sell your game to a publisher and have them market and distribute it, buy your own ad space on videos or websites, which was especially easy for solo devs since they're all notoriously made of money, or just throw it up in a gaming marketplace to die. In 2016, over 4,000 games were released on Steam, nearly 40% of all games on the platform at the time. And if you're like me, you're probably thinking, how in the world was anyone supposed to compete with that? Well, back in the day, there was one answer for indie devs that almost completely bypassed this issue. YouTube Let's Players! Who would dedicate themselves to playing new games, old games, obscure games, and indie games to hundreds of thousands, even millions of watchers. Send them a free copy of your game and some merchandise, and then sit back and bask in the wealth of free promotion, baby. There was almost a symbiotic relationship between the Let's Players and the indie game developers, where one would provide the product and the other would sell it. They seemingly could not survive without each other, and because of this, arguably the most successful games that came out in the next few years were the ones that would elicit a strong emotional response from the Let's Players they were made for. Games like Doki Doki Literature Club, Undertale, Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, Surgeon Simulator, Big Rigs Over the Road Racing, Five Nights at Freddy's, 1, 2, 3, 4, World Sister Location Pizzeria Simulator, Ultimate Custom Night, VR Help Wanted, and yes, Cluster Truck, which would then create a chain reaction of people watching and then sharing said game in order to spread that experience. Hey, did you see Pee Wee Diddy's playthrough of Cluster Truck yet? You mean that game that came out 3 years ago and fell out of relevancy? That's the one. No, I don't believe I have. Well, what'd you think? I need to share this with literally every person I've ever met. Because of this, all of these games essentially became overnight successes, which inevitably spawned merchandise, sequels, and a lasting relationship between the developers and the gaming community as a whole. So why is this important? Why is any of this important? Where are we? Who am I? What's a cluster truck? These are all very good questions. In short, Cluster Truck is a physics-based platforming game where you, the player, jump on a series of trucks moving from point A to point B, with the primary obstacle being avoiding touching the floor, which kills you instantly. Not to mention certain parts of the environment kill you instantly while others don't, there are random hazards everywhere that are sometimes completely unpredictable, and the truck drivers themselves don't know how to drive. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Cluster Truck is a 3D platformer. Plain and simple. You've got a single goalpost to reach and a multitude of trucks moving vaguely in that direction that you can jump on in order to get there. It's actually a pretty fun and quirky idea. The fact that the platforms you could usually depend on in these types of games are independently moving towards their own goal, which results in a whole host of mayhem-inducing levels. This element of randomness gives way to the driving theme of the game, that being that it's a clusterfuck. You get the idea. Coupled with this, the game's difficulty eventually became its main selling point. Cluster Truck in particular was picked up by the Let's Players machine and classified as a rage game, causing some incredibly explosive and memorable reactions from some of gaming's most popular online entertainers. Needless to say, the game exploded as a result. But here's the thing. In my recent escapades of buying an unhealthy amount of games on my Nintendo Switch, I bought Cluster Truck with that same mentality in mind. I mean, the people playing it looked like they were having fun, so by extension, so would I. My biggest question now is, are these rage games, by chasing the reactionary-based gaming market, designed to maximize fun or marketability? I trusted the Mark with pliers and Celtic guys, and now, having played through Cluster Truck multiple times, I want to die. If you're like me, then Cluster Truck's premise alone was probably enough to at least get you interested in the game. Not only will you be parkouring from truck to truck in wacky and unpredictable environments, but with the help of a tool set of power-ups you can unlock throughout the game, you'll be doing it in style. That on its own sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to have played this game, because the Cluster Truck that exists today is this concept, only it's being hidden underneath a giant pile of terrible decisions. And herein lies the first issue I have with Cluster Truck, that being the controls. And when I say controls, I'm not referring to when you press the A button and your character jumps. Wow. I'm referring to how your player controls. Because behind Cluster Truck's minimalist and enticing presentation are hundreds of deadly formulas and machinations beyond your control that turn this game from a bright and sunny day into a ceaseless hellscape of acid rain. For the sake of ease, everything becomes easier to explain if we examine level 2-2. For the first few levels of Cluster Truck, you have to deal with minimal obstacles and hazards with only slight deviations in the truck's trajectory from time to time. They almost always shoot forward in a straight line, giving you time to hop between them and become accustomed to the game's movement. This all changes as soon as you enter World 2 Level 2 and find— Whoa! What's this?
Oh my god, it's a 90-degree turn.
Well, seeing as I'm now a
seasoned platformer
who's accomplished 11 of Cluster Truck's levels, I see no reason to not just jump forward and— Okay, looks like I overshot it. I'll give it another go, this time making sure to undershoot the jump as to best land on the other line of trucks moving in the This time I'll make sure to land precisely on the trucks, even though with their current orientation it's unlikely I'll— Okay, change of strategy. I'll face towards where the new line of trucks is moving and jump sideways. I'll carefully apply just a little bit more force to— If I don't jump forward at all, I'll— Or like— What are you doing? What the fuck? Maybe I just suck at video games. Perhaps it was my mistake to think that I could feasibly beat World 2 Level 2 of Cluster Truck in one go, but seriously, why do I keep dying over and over here? Keep in mind, I know how this level works. I've played this before. The issue here is that momentum is tied to the player character's head, meaning that you always move furthest wherever the camera is facing. So when I jump towards the second line of trucks, which the game's level design is directly telling me to do, I almost always overshoot it because of the momentum I've gained from the first line of trucks, as well as my jump is too powerful to overcome. If you don't move at all, however, and expect only the momentum of the trucks to just carry you over, that ain't the answer either. With this information in mind, you might assume that in order to reach the second line of trucks, you have to first be facing the direction they're moving and then blindly side jump to the left, like an insane person, hoping that one of the other trucks will materialize beneath you. Well, even if you do land on one of the trucks by doing this, it's still likely you'll slide off because the physics hate you. Are you beginning to see a pattern here? All of this might seem like unnecessary nitpicking to some of you, but these are the fundamental principles of the player's movement that I should be able to properly rationalize and learn. Even after hundreds of playthroughs of this level, I still struggle with hitting this jump just right. What I assume you're supposed to do is instead face the direction that the second line of trucks are moving and then jump forward once you reach the fence. Coupled with the fact that your momentum and direction line up neatly with the trucks beneath you, you should realistically be able to intersect with one of them and carry on with the level. Even your risk of sliding off the trucks is mitigated since the trucks are moving in the same direction that you are. The only problem with this is that the level designer put a big tree in the way, which kills you instantly upon contact. Why? Everything about the level design is telling me to move forward, and when I come up with one reasonable solution, there's an insta-kill death obstacle in my way, which is almost symbolically telling me, yeah, that's not the way to do it. And fine. I deal with the first jump. Face the direction of the trucks, look down towards the ground, tighten my invisible body to make sure I minimize my momentum as much as possible. After 20 attempts, I finally get it right. When I first played through this level, I couldn't help but notice how realistic the movement of your character is trying to be. Follow me on this one. In real life, if we want to get the most out of a jump, it's best to get a running start and face forward. Any sort of side hop dramatically reduces the distance we can jump horizontally, we can't really influence our aerial momentum, and upon landing with any added force, we're likely to slide a bit before coming to a complete stop. Aside from the wonky physics, it feels like this was the designer's intention. So my immediate question becomes, why are more realistic controls and physics being applied to a game where I'm jumping on a series of moving trucks and goofy worlds with fantastical power-ups? Seems kinda silly now that I'm saying it out loud. The reason that Mario feels so nice in his 3D games is because even if you say long jump in an unfavorable direction, you can almost always slightly influence his airborne momentum to correct yourself. The designers threw in tons of subtle mechanics like this to make sure that your control of Mario is so airtight that any critical platforming error made during normal gameplay is undoubtedly your fault. In Cluster Truck's case, I'm almost never able to properly reorient myself while in the air, which means I have to hunker down and dedicate myself 100% to whatever jump I decide to make. But that's not all. As you've probably noticed, the game also takes place in first person, which means that everything we see in-game is coming from our player character's face. This provides a more personal, epic gamer experience, and on the surface seems like a unique and intelligent touch, except it isn't. Allow me to illustrate the problem in one swift motion. I apologize to any of my necklace viewers for potentially reminding them of similar traumatic experiences. I don't think I need to explain everything that you just looked at since you also have eyes, but essentially the in-game camera can turn 360 degrees further than any normal neck should be able to. Because of this, I can only assume our player character is either doing this, or this. Except, if you can believe it, there is still one minor discrepancy with both of these interpretations. As all of you know, if you have an object lying in space that is obstructing any sort of light source, it will create a shadow. To a similar effect, a drop shadow in a video game is a basic shape that exists underneath the player at all times in order to help them understand where they're going to land, which improves their overall spatial awareness. So how does CLUSTERTRUCK approach this very delicate issue? It doesn't. Which must mean that we have no body whatsoever. Yes, in a game about precise platforming, where timing, spacing, and not dying is imperative for you to get to the end of each level, you don't have any physical limbs or even a drop shadow to indicate where you're about to land. Because these two things are gone, you now have to hope that you're going to land where you think you will. But you know what? That's okay. While I'm in the air, I can just triangulate the position of where I think I'm going to land and anticipate the physics of my character's arc of motion, making sure to carefully observe the environment with the trucks and then contemplate the logistics of my existence and why I'm even doing this in the first place. All of these issues really bog down the player's movement, and as the levels get harder, it just begins to stack. But what about everything else besides the player? Surely the trucks and environments are suited for these design decisions. For those of you who don't know, RNG is a term used to describe random number generators, which are used to manufacture luck-based mechanics or simulate randomness. Though it may not be immediately apparent, CLUSTERTRUCK employs RNG in so many areas that every time I boot up the game, it feels like I'm entering the f***ing lottery. And for a skill-based 3D platformer, this is what we like to call really not good. For starters, if we take a look at the trucks themselves, we'll see that the truck's movement on any first playthrough will be fairly jarring considering how sporadic their patterns can often be. Unlike a usual set of platforms and other platformers being jumped on by the platformee, each truck has a mind of its own and will often crash into its brethren on the path to glory. All seems well with this design decision initially. After all, the game is called CLUSTERTRUCK, so it's likely that some chaos is meant to ensue, but the ugliness begins to show as soon as you decide to repeat the level. You'll quickly begin to realize that these trucks are actually doing something very strange. Although their point A to point B path is predetermined, the relationship of their wheels to the ground is not, so each time you load up the level, every single truck is going to move slightly differently than it did last time. This minor change seems very small and almost completely inconsequential to the untrained eye, but believe me, this completely throws a wrench in the general learning structure that a game like this demands. Because I can't anticipate the motions of the trucks to a T, most of the game is now completely based on spontaneity and my ability to improvise on the spot. This would be totally fine, except as we've already discussed, anytime I try and be spontaneous, the game freaks out. This results in countless deaths that I couldn't plan for and upon reflection have no way to learn from. There needs to be a relationship between the player's deaths and how they can learn from them. In Spelunky, when the player first jumps on top of a bed of spikes, they will die, resulting in them not doing that ever again. In Dark Souls, whenever the player decides to walk 10 feet in any direction, they will die, resulting in them not playing anymore. In both of these cases, I can see what killed me. Bed of spikes, giant Taurus demon from hell, tomato tomato. However, if the death is unfair or hard to follow, the player is unable to properly analyze what killed them and then readjust themselves for when they attempt to conquer that obstacle in their next run through. This invisible design principle is the key to challenging skill-based video games, and without it you're left with a frustrating mess. Hint, hint, wink, wonk. Because the trucks have their movement variables changed upon every level reset, that awesome explosion of trucks running into each other, creating a volcano of airborne platforms that I could matrix my way up and get some crazy airtime, is gone. The opportunity is gone and I am simply left with randomness. You could argue that by doing this, the crazy tricks in airtime that you can sometimes come across feel more special. And though I would like to agree, I don't really want to make the trade if it means I have to die 40 times in order to get that highlight. If the truck's layout was as predictable as the level layout, you could design the chaos around the player's movement. What if a truck dogpile is actually laid out so that it can help you jump over a pit, or one of the trucks veers off course and leads to a secret exit? If the chaotic nature of the trucks was consistent per playthrough of each level, then the player could create their own fantastical approach, flipping in between trucks and creating this unique path based on the information they've gathered. As of right now, I never feel like I'm comfortably learning a level's ins and outs because the randomness of the trucks is always an obstacle. And it's not just the trucks. Randomness is also embedded into the levels themselves. Level 1-9, a line of trucks at the start of the level rush towards a line of trucks moving in the opposite direction at the other end of the map. The result? Absolute chaos, which more often than not results in your death. The solution? Hope and pray that the truck you land on manages to slip through the madness. Level 2-10, there's this series of boulders which have random spawn points up the hill that are too large to escape if you get caught in their path. The solution? Hope and pray that the truck you're sitting on is on course to not overlap with the boulders. Level 7-5, missiles that fire in the direction of the player during random intervals. The solution? No. You tell me. But the best example of this is level 4-4, where you spawn in to see this. Amazing. And all of these individual lasers are randomly oriented and spun at different intervals every time you restart the level, so there's no way to truly figure out your way through this. By the time I had finished this level with the slow-mo power-up, after hours and hours of throwing myself into hot spinning lasers, I felt as if the game had cheated me. The victory wasn't something that I had earned, it was something that I had been given because of chance. If anything, it felt kinda gross. And what annoys me the most is that level 4-7 is the level this should have been. Each laser is in a fixed position and therefore can be strategically avoided through skill and repetition. Aside from the fact that the lasers themselves kill me where I least expect it because I'm stuck in first person and have no sense of spatial awareness, up top for the callback, I was able to learn the level's layout and get better over time. By the time I had finally beaten it, I felt like I had earned something. In Clustertruck for the Nintendo Switch. I sincerely don't know why this design philosophy wasn't more properly utilized throughout the entirety of the game. Now let's collectively power up for the next section. Now I'll admit, they do alleviate a lot of the problems that I've been talking about. The grappling hook lets you grapple to any truck in your line of sight, the dash power-up gives you a chance to boost forward in any direction, and the double jumps, you feel me? But there's an inherent disconnect for me between the power-ups and the game's current design, because the base movement of your character is so bad that the addition of a grappling hook doesn't really change that. It makes it better, for sure, but imagine if Super Mario Bros. Was only fun if you had the invincibility star. Once you got it, the music floods your ears and you just go nuts. And then when it's over, the world gets a bit more gray, and your energy begins to deplete. You begin to question your very existence. Why am I doing this? Why am I jumping on a series of trucks and dying over and over again, only to throw myself into the pit of fire once more? Is this hell? Have I finally found the bottom? Is this truly the best use of my time? Oh look, another invincibility star.
Ha-ha, wee! Happy everybody! Super Mario! Woo! Everybody freak out, yeah!
My most used power-up by far is the slow-mo ability, as its slowdown effect allows me to properly control my aerial momentum and play the game how it should have been designed from the beginning. I shouldn't have to depend on these power-ups in order to both have a chance and also have fun. Oh, by the way, you don't get all of the power-ups from the start, either. You have to earn points at the end of each level, which can then be spent to earn the individual power-ups. Thankfully, the more necessary abilities like the double jump and dash are fairly cheap, but this system is still designed in such a way that it's possible to get stuck with one of the less useful power-ups and have to grind older levels in order to get the right one, because some of these are not as good as the others. I can understand the inclusion of the more outlandish power-ups, like the truck flipping one or epic points time, but what I don't understand is why not have all of the power-ups be fun and goofy and make the player's natural movement from the start be the best tool that they have. Mario's power-ups are an incredible addition to his arsenal, but they are by no means necessary in order for the game to be fun. Now, to be fair, all of Clustertruck is technically beatable without power-ups. But you're gonna need them for the last level. The last level broke me. We begin on a classic set of familiar trucks, all running up a large ramp of brimstone and rock, when all of a sudden, Satan shows up with his meaty hands and tries to smash you with a big fat hammer. Hilariously enough, and I do admit, I kinda like this, Satan himself is entirely comprised of molten trucks, all of which will kill you in one hit. Ooh, my favorite. Just when all hope seems lost, however, we get the chance to jump onto a select few trucks lining Satan's body that allow us to jump up onto his head and land on a big green button. No, I'm not making this up. The issues, aside from the multitude I've talked about at length already, begin to surface as soon as you begin your trek up Mount Molten Mephistopheles. For starters, the trucks are placed in such a way as to stick slightly out from his body, meaning that one wrong step and you'll either plummet to your doom or die because you're touching his fiery truck skin. This would be fine on its own, except for the fact that lava is simultaneously spawned beneath you. Because of course it is! And Satan himself is also descending downward into it, resulting in your usual pixel-perfect movement being just a tad bit more atrocious than usual. All of these variables make for one of the most infuriating, fun-murdering experiences that I have ever seen that is bound to waste hours upon hours of your precious time, and once you finally get to the top and land on Satan's signature green button, laying waste to the menace that has plagued us all, he kicks you off his head and sends you back down where you have to start all over! Oh yeah, Did I not mention you have to jump on that button 3 times in a row? 3! And each time you do land on the button, he just sends you back down where you have to deal with all manner of lasers, lava, and other newly spawned hazards because the first part was too easy. I've only beaten this section once, and that's because the game glitched out and gave me the win after 2 button presses. I have yet to beat it again, and frankly, I don't want to. This is hell, none of it feels fun, none of it feels finished. This is potentially the worst ending to any game I've ever experienced. You know, I can't be too hard on this game. As someone who's well aware of the time and effort that goes into creating and publishing a video game, I admire the fact that Landmass Studios was able to make one at all, let alone a successful one. I mean, there's a ton of videos of people who have done speedruns, let's plays, and reviews of this game and seemingly worked around the issues I've mentioned. And based off of Landmass Studios' CLUSTERTRUCK description on their website, the game sounded like it was a fun idea that they took and ran with. It spawned multiple incredibly entertaining playthroughs, made a ton of money back due to its sales, and entertained millions of players throughout the world. It's a weird thing, but I almost don't feel like this game was made with the Rage game idea in mind. It doesn't feel like a calculated effort, more like it just hit the market at the right time. I still feel the way I do, though, and perhaps I'm justified in feeling this way. I think I understand you, CLUSTERTRUCK. Despite our differences, you were made because a few designers thought you'd be both a quirky idea and a great video game. And you know what? You kind of are. You've got a goofy premise, a minimalist and charming art style, and trucks that honk like they're in pain whenever you jump on them in hell. There's a lot here to like. Maybe even love. And if nothing else, you weren't designed as a Rage game first, and a good game second. That being said, there is still something else out there. Well, here it is. The granddaddy of them all. Surgeon Simulator. This game arguably kicked off this entire Rage game trend, with PewDiePie playing this game and racking up 13 million views on his first video alone. This in turn led to increased sales for the game and tons of other creators hopping on the bandwagon in order to reap the benefits of the new trend. Surgeon Simulator is widely known for the countless Rage compilations it created on YouTube, as well as the humorous scenarios that have been spawned because of it, but I'm sorry, the game sucks. Of all the games I've bought on my Nintendo Switch thus far, if given the chance, I would return this one in a heartbeat, because Surgeon Simulator holds the player's gameplay experience hostage at the expense of telling a joke. So am I ever going to be able to get better at this game? No, the point is that you suck at surgery. Pretty great, right? Oh, yeah. Your character's hand stumbles around and bumps into things, which makes any surgery a bumbling, flustered mess, which is the point, but just like a point, it's sharp and it burst my bubble during my first playthrough. I, too, love the videos that were spawned because of Surgeon Simulator, but if it has the balls to call itself a video game, then it will be judged as one. Any video game is essentially a trial of challenges that have been designed to be beaten by the player. If at any point your experience cannot be justified by a lack of skill or understanding of the game's mechanics, then you've ultimately misled the player as a game designer and must reevaluate your approach to the concepts you're trying to get across. Surgeon Simulator falls flat on its stupid face in this department because I understand exactly what I need to do, and I still can't do it! There is no point in this game where I feel like I'm in control, and that truly sickens me. My experience as a player is hampered from the get-go because it's supposed to be funny. Guess what? It isn't. My advice, if you're gonna play Surgeon Simulator, then you better get trashed. In the end, considering YouTube's crackdown on gaming content, the wave of reactionary-based games has mostly subsided. But it's important to look back at these games as objectively as possible in order to learn from their mistakes, and subsequently why they were all successful. I believe that if a game's primary gameplay loop is filled with unfair deaths or frustrating gameplay mechanics that cheat the player out of a rewarding and entertaining experience, then the game is ultimately wasting that person's time. Time that could be spent doing something fun. We use video games as a way to relax, challenge ourselves, or act as a vessel to create and tell stories to others. They can be truly beautiful things, but only if the experience is designed as such. I strongly believe that a Rage game, fundamentally, is not good for the player. It's a system that is designed to elicit a negative emotional response from Let's Players, only to have that act as a marketing push so that the game is shared by their massive audiences. Though I respect the hustle, this approach ultimately guts the experience of the game itself. Why would someone play a game only to get frustrated with it for over 70% of their playtime? The point of a game is to challenge you, but if each death feels unfair, then it only serves to spawn anger. I've spent over 100 hours playing CLUSTERTRUCK now, and there's no doubt in my mind I wish I could go back and spend that time more wisely. This is the point in the video where I give these games a rating. I'm one of those people who likes to separate my ratings into two categories, objective and subjective. The main difference is that while a subjective rating considers my viewpoint, taste, and experience, an objective rating is where I try my best to remove my own personal bias as much as possible in order to give the subject a fair grade. The distinction between the two is important because although I may personally not be a fan of Halloween 4, Derek Returns, Subjective 3, I can still recommend it to any horror movie enthusiast because the film was genuinely scary and had a great story, Objective 7. As it stands currently, Clustertruck is being sold for $15 to $20 depending on the platform, and considering the quality, I'd only ever buy it if it goes on sale for less than $10. And with that, I'm going to give Clustertruck an Objective 4 and a Subjective 3. This has been John, bringing you another In the Box review. Thanks for watching.